Hello and welcome back to part 3 of the How to Get Rich on Roblox series. If you have not seen the previous videos, I would recommend watching those so you know what's going on. So in this video, we're going to be showing you the basics of scripting and making what you see here on the screen with the orange and blue blocks. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is make the script. We're going to put the script in the server script service right here. You can right click, go to insert object and hit script. Once you have the script and it opens up, you're going to see this line called print hello world. If you were to run this script right now, all it would do is print hello world inside of the output. The output is another thing you should always have open while you're scripting. You can put it down here, but you get it open by pressing view and hovering over the output button. This is going to save you a lot of time and energy while you're scripting because it will show you a lot of things that you made mistakes on and it will help you fix it. So what we're going to do is delete this, and the first thing I'm going to do is put some comments to section out the code. The first comment is variables. These are going to be values that hold other values, so we can use them throughout this script the whole time. The next is functions. By putting these two dashes before some letters, you can comment it out, meaning that it won't interfere with the code, but is still there for you to read. The first variable we're going to put is max length. So what you need to know right now is that local means that it's part of the script, and you need to put this so that it knows that you're going to create the variable here. Max length is the name of the variable. You probably want to name it something that you can easily find later on. And equals this number. So basically whenever we call this later on, it's going to be the same thing as saying 10. It's easier to put this instead of writing 10 everywhere, because if we wanted to change max length everywhere, we would have to go back and change all the 10s. The next variable we need is starter block. It's the same beginning as last time with this local to say that you're making a variable and the name of the variable, but this time we have these brackets at the end. This means you're making an array. An array is essentially a variable that holds multiple values at once. So in this array I could put 10, 9, and 8 and a bunch more things. But for now we're going to leave it blank because in the rest of the script we're going to be adding things to this array. This is also another variable. As you can see, it's the same as the last one. It's an empty array. It's going to be for the light teal blocks. So that's it for the variables. Now we have to move on to functions. Functions are blocks of code that can be called later at multiple times. So it basically just organizes the code and makes it easier to call and to fix if you make mistakes. You can see some similarities with the variables. I'm putting local at the front, but this time I'm putting local function to tell them that it's a function. And right here is the name. In here, you can leave it blank if you don't take arguments, but for this one we're going to take an argument, and the argument is going to be start num. You can name it whatever you want, but you should probably name it something that you can find easily later. The next thing we're going to do is make a for loop. So what I just did is make a for loop. It's going to run through it a certain amount of times. So when I end up calling this function, which I will do down here to demonstrate, this is how you call a function. It must be outside of the function that creates it. So if I were to make another function, I could put this inside of that. However, I cannot put it in the start function. So when I call this, since there's a variable here that says start num, I would have to make a variable here. Not a variable. I would have to put a value here. It could be any number. But I'm going to put 6 for now. So while it's 6, this for loop is going to make this variable called I and set it to 0. It's the same thing as here, but we're using it for a specific purpose. After that, it's going to run it until it's going to increase I until it reaches the number that is start num. So we set it to 6, so it's going to run from 0 to 6. And inside, after the do, we want it to tell it what it needs to do each time. This right here is another variable. I'm using the same as this up here, local, the name equals, but this time it's instance.new part. What this does is it creates a new part, and if you looked at the last video, you know what a part is already. It's basically just one of those bricks. So after we have the part, we need to set the part's position, its size, whether it's anchored, what it's parented to, and the color. Then we need to insert it into this array up here. Okay, this right here says the block's position. I didn't put local in front of it because it's using this variable right here. So I'm calling the variable and changing its value position. This dot right here basically says that position is part of this block. So after the equals, I'm changing it to vector.3.new 0, 2.5, and 0 plus I times 10. What this is going to do is, for the first one, since I equals 0, I times 10 is going to equal 0. So it's going to spawn the block at 0, x, and 0, z. The 2.5 is so that it's above the ground. But if I is equal to 1, then it adds 10 to the z value and it moves it over. The next thing we need to set is the size. The same thing as this above here, we're setting a part of it, which is the size, to vector 555. That's just going to make it a regular cube. Block.anchored is whether or not the block can fall. If the block.anchored is set to false, then it can fall. However, if it's set to true, then it will stay in place. We need it to stay in place, so it is set to true. block.parent sets what the block's parent is, basically what it's under. For example, the scripts that we made, well, the one script that we made is under server script service, so the parent of the script is server script service. Workspace is this up here, which is where all of your objects should be if they want to appear in the world. So by setting the block to parent workspace, we're basically putting it inside of the world. Right here, I'm setting the color of the block to an orange. So I'm setting the brick color to brick color dot new, and then I'm finding the orange that I want. The last thing we need to do in this function is make each block a variable inside of the array that we made earlier. So we do this by saying table.insert starter blocks. This is the array that we made earlier. Then we have to say where we want it, I plus 1, because although the for loop is starting at 0, the array starts counting at 1, so we need to make the index 1 over whatever I is. The next thing we put in here is the block. Again, we are referencing this from up here, this variable that we made. So we're moving the block to this position in this array. So if I go and test this out right now, what it should do is create a cube at position 0, 2.5, 0. Then create 5 more cubes with spacing of 10. As you can see, it only made 1 cube. So this is why we need the output. If you look up here, it says server script service attempt to reference field insert a nil value. So if you look down here, it says it gives you a line 15 and line 19. If we go to line 19, that's where we called the function. However, if we go to line 15, this is the line that is saying there's a problem at. And as you can see, I misspelled insert. Now when we play the game, we can see that there's no errors in the output, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks here. Seems like there's another problem, because this number that we put in here says 6. Oh right, I forgot that we're starting the count at 0, so we have to say starter number minus 1. Now we have our 6 blocks. We can get rid of this for now, but we're going to put it back later. The next function we need is called lengthen. I made it the same way as the one up here with local function and its name, which by the way can be changed to whatever you want again, but I'm making it lengthened so it's easy for me to understand what I'm doing if I make a mistake. This right here is a variable like this. It's called array. So when I call the function, I have to put something inside of the parentheses so that it knows that's what this is. Again, in here, we're going to make some more for loops. So I made the for loop like before, and this time I'm calling from the array, which is here. This hashtag array is getting how many variables are inside the array. So if I were to put starter blocks and I had start with 6 in it as last time, then there would be 6 variables inside of starter blocks. So when I called lengthen and there are 6 variables in starter blocks, if I put starter blocks here for the array, then it will run from 0 to 6. However, I put -1, so it runs from 0 to 5, which is 6 times, which is what we want. This is another variable I'm calling length. It is basically how many of the blue blocks will spawn on top of the orange blocks whenever it refreshes. So I'm making it a random number. This right here is math.random. With math dot, you can use different math things, like you can use absolute value, you can use square root, but this one uses random. So I put the lowest number, which is 0, and the highest number, which is max length. Up here we have max length as 10, meaning that whenever the blue blocks spawn, it's going to be a random number from 0 to 10. Now what I just created here is a nested for loop. So this is a for loop inside of a for loop. So the reason I changed this from I to J is because if you have the same letter on both of them, or the same whatever you happen to be using on both of them, then it might get confused while you're doing the scripts and it won't run correctly. And we're using length here, so it's going to run however many of the times the random chose. What we're going to do is basically the same thing as what we're doing up here, this block of code, but we're using it to create those blue blocks. I just created the new instance of the part. Now I'm working on the position. Now what I did here with this array and then these brackets in I.1, what I'm doing here is calling the array that's up here and looking for something in a specific index. So when I say that I want I plus 1, whatever this I is from the for loop up here, I want to look one number past it. So when this is 0, I want to look at the first index in array. So it's going to give me the first block that was placed in there. And it's going to give me the block's position, that X position, and I want to add 10 plus whatever J is times 10. What this gives me is whenever a blue block is spawned, it will be spawned at least 10 studs away from the orange block. And whenever the loop keeps going for however many times the random chose, it's going to go 10 further. Now we're going to do the block size, which is going to be the same as the other ones. These blocks will also be anchored. The difference between the other blocks and these blocks is the color here. I chose a different one. The positions, I chose different positions, and we're going to insert it into appended blocks instead of starter blocks. This will make them easier to manipulate later. So we now have two functions, and one thing about code is that it's a good idea to test it every once in a while once you add some code to make sure nothing is broken. Because if you add, let's say, 20 lines of code and you haven't tested, then it might be more difficult to find than if you added maybe 5 lines of code and then you tested. So we're going to test them by calling the start function with 6 blocks. Then we're going to call the lengthen function with the array of starter blocks. Now we're going to test. As you can see, there are no errors in the output. We still have our 6 orange blocks, and the blue blocks have spawned in the correct places after the orange blocks. Now let's count up the largest one to make sure it's 10. This is 9 blocks, which is still good. So all of them fit as we asked for. The next function we're going to make is shorten. What all this function is going to do is take away the blue blocks. So what I just did here is I'm doing the same thing as in the other ones where I put array as a value. I'm making a for loop by going through all the objects inside of the array. Then at each for loop, at each round of the for loop, I'm using the array, going to each index and destroying it. By using these semicolons here, I'm calling a function that is part of the block, which is destroy, basically just takes it away and deletes it from the world. That's all we need for that one. The next function is called refresh. Now, as you can see, I used a while loop this time. This is a loop just like the for loop. However, it's a bit different in that I want this while loop to keep running forever, and that's not something you can do with the for loop. So with this while loop, I have it on a wait, so it will continue to run every 0.2 seconds. And what I want it to do will go in here. So in the while loop, I want it to refresh. So basically what I want it to do is create those blue blocks, take the blue blocks away, and create them again. I want it to continue repeating that endlessly. So I'm going to call the lengthen function with an argument of starter blocks. Wait 2 seconds so everyone can see the blocks when they appear. Then I'm going to call shorten to take it away with an argument of appended blocks. What this will do is wait, call the function, wait again, take it away, and then wait, and keep going endlessly. The last function we need, I'm going to call main. Technically, you don't really need this one. However, it's for organizational purposes, so it's good to have it. All I'm doing in this function is putting the other functions that I'm going to call. The reason I'm not calling shorten or lengthen inside of main is because those are being called inside of refresh. Then at the very end, all I have to do is call main. Now, when we run this, what this should do is, from the bottom, it's going to call main, look inside of main, call start with an argument of 6. So it's going to go up here to start function and do what we told it to do before. Then it's going to come back here and go to refresh, where it will repeat these. After doing all of that, this is the result we end with. However, for whatever reason, it seems like this block doesn't want to disappear. Which may be a problem with the code. However, I don't see where the problem is right now, and the rest of it seems to be working fine. So that's how you create this right here, and those were some very basic scripting things. So just like the building, it is a good idea to practice these things regularly, and in the next videos we're going to be repeatedly using them and the building and showing you how to get to 10K. Thanks for watching.